The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and broken dreams. I sat across from my brother Marcus, watching him try not to smile as the will was read. Grandpa Joe had been dead 3 weeks, and here we were, dividing up 50 years of his life like it was a garage sale. To my eldest grandson, Marcus William Hayes, I leave the family farm, all 500 acres, including the main house, barn, and all livestock. The lawyer's voice droned on while Marcus straightened his tie. He'd been waiting for this moment since we were kids, my hands clenched in my lap. 43 years old, and I was still getting the scraps. I'd worked that farm every summer since I was 12. I'd fixed fences, hauled hay, and spent countless nights helping Grandpa with sick cattle. But I wasn't the eldest. I wasn't the golden boy who went to college and became a banker. To my younger grandson, Daniel Robert Hayes. Here it comes, I thought. Maybe the old pickup truck. Maybe the tools in the shed. I leave my 1987 John Deere tractor manual, currently located in the kitchen drawer. Marcus actually laughed. A tractor manual. Grandpa's final insult from beyond the grave. The lawyer cleared his throat. That concludes the will. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Marcus was already talking about selling the cattle, modernizing the operation. He'd never loved that land the way I did. To him, it was just dollar signs and tax write-offs. Outside, the October wind cut through my jacket. I climbed into my rusted Ford and drove away from the farm that should have been mine. In my rearview mirror, I could see Marcus shaking hands with the lawyer, probably already planning his victory celebration. A tractor manual. Thanks for nothing, Grandpa. 3 days later, I finally worked up the courage to collect my inheritance. Marcus had left the manual on the kitchen counter with a note, "Enjoy your treasure, M." Real classy. The manual was older than I remembered. Its blue cover faded to grey. John Deere 4430 Operator's Manual was barely visible on the front. I'd seen Grandpa reading it countless times, usually when something broke down and we needed to figure out which part to order. I flipped through the pages, remembering how he'd taught me to read hydraulic diagrams and understand gear ratios. Every page was filled with his handwriting, notes about maintenance schedules, part numbers, and modifications he'd made over the years. His careful script covered the margins like a conversation with himself. But something felt wrong. The manual was thicker than it should be. I held it up to the light and noticed some pages seemed doubled up. When I looked closer, I realized certain pages had been carefully glued together, creating hidden pockets. My heart started racing. I grabbed a butter knife from the drawer and carefully worked it along the edge of page 47. The glue gave way, revealing a folded piece of paper tucked inside. It was a bank statement. But not from First National, where Grandpa had always done his banking. This was from Cayman International Trust, dated just 6 months ago. The account balance made my hands shake. $10,247,132.67. I sat down hard in Grandpa's old chair. $10 million. Hidden in a tractor manual that Marcus had dismissed as worthless junk, my mind raced through the implications. This wasn't just money, this was justice. But first I needed to understand what I was looking at. I carefully opened more pages, finding account numbers, passwords, and what looked like investment records. Grandpa, you clever old bastard. I spent the next 4 hours methodically opening every glued page in that manual. What I found changed everything I thought I knew about my grandfather. There were offshore account statements going back 15 years, investment portfolios with companies I'd never heard of, real estate holdings in 3 different countries, and most shocking of all, a letter addressed to me, dated just 2 months before Grandpa died. "Danny," it began in his familiar handwriting, "if you're reading this, then Marcus got the farm like I planned, and you got this old manual like I hoped. Don't be angry about the will, son. I had my reasons. My hands trembled as I continued reading. Your brother sees the farm as a business. You see it as home. That's why he gets the land, and you get something more valuable, the means to buy it back if you choose. The money in these accounts came from oil rights I sold 20 years ago. Marcus doesn't know about them because he never asked the right questions. The letter went on to explain how Grandpa had quietly invested the oil money, watching it grow while living like he was still scraping by. He'd kept the secret to protect the family from changing, to make sure we stayed grounded. The account information is all here. The passwords are your grandmother's maiden name, followed by the year we were married. Use this wisely, Danny. Buy back the farm if Marcus will sell or start fresh somewhere else. Either way, you'll never have to worry about money again. I leaned back in the chair, overwhelmed. Outside, I could hear Marcus talking to someone about installing new irrigation systems. He was already spending money he didn't have, planning improvements for land he might not keep much longer. The irony was beautiful. He'd gotten exactly what he wanted, and I'd gotten exactly what I needed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the ceiling, thinking about $10 million and what it meant. Part of me wanted to march over to Marcus's house and wave the bank statements in his face. But Grandpa's letter had been clear. Use this wisely. I needed a plan. First, I had to verify the accounts were real. The next morning, I drove to the city and found an internet cafe. Using the account numbers and passwords from the manual, I logged into the Cayman International website. The money was real. All of it. But there was more. Grandpa had been smarter than I'd given him credit for. The accounts weren't just sitting there earning interest. He'd invested in agricultural futures, renewable energy, and even some tech companies. The man who still used a rotary phone had somehow built a fortune in the modern economy. I printed out the most recent statements and drove home, my mind racing. Marcus had already started making changes to the farm. I'd seen the contractors measuring for new grain silos. He was leveraging everything, betting the farm's future on expansion. That gave me an idea. What if I let him overextend himself? What if I waited for him to dig himself into debt with all his grand plans? Then, when he needed money most, I could make him an offer he couldn't refuse. It would take patience, maybe a year, maybe two. But I had something Marcus didn't know about: time and money. I could wait for the perfect moment to reveal my hand. I tucked the bank statements back into the manual and put it in my truck's glove compartment. Let Marcus think he'd won. Let him believe I was just the bitter younger brother who got nothing. Soon enough, he'd learn the truth. Over the next 6 months, I watched Marcus transform the farm with the detached interest of someone watching a slow-motion car crash. He installed the new irrigation system, built 2 additional grain silos, and bought a fleet of modern equipment. Every improvement was financed, every upgrade leveraged against the farm's equity. I got a job at the feed store in town, which gave me the perfect excuse to stay close and observe. Farmers love to talk, and Marcus was no exception. He'd come in twice a week, ordering supplies and bragging about his modernization plans. Going to triple our yield in 2 years, he told anyone who'd listen. This old place just needed someone with vision. What he didn't mention were the loan payments. I'd done my homework, checking public records and talking to people at the bank. Marcus had borrowed against everything: the land, the house, even Grandpa's old pickup truck. His monthly payments were astronomical. Meanwhile, I'd been busy too. I'd quietly moved the offshore money into more accessible accounts, always keeping it hidden but available. I'd also been learning about farming operations, studying market trends and commodity prices. If I was going to buy back the farm, I needed to understand the business better than Marcus did. The irony wasn't lost on me. While he was playing the big shot, I was actually becoming the farmer Grandpa had always wanted me to be. In late spring, I heard the first whispers of trouble. A drought was predicted for the summer. Crop prices were falling. Marcus had bet everything on perfect conditions, and Mother Nature wasn't cooperating. I found myself visiting Grandpa's grave more often, usually after Marcus left his weekly flowers. "Almost time, old man," I'd whisper to the headstone. "Almost time to make this right." The summer of 2023 was the driest in 30 years. By July, the corn was stunted and the soybeans were dying in the fields. Marcus's expensive irrigation system helped, but it couldn't work miracles. You can't irrigate what isn't there. I watched him grow more desperate each week. He'd come into the feed store looking haggard, his confident swagger replaced by the hollow stare of a man watching his dreams turn to dust. The loan payments were still due every month, regardless of crop yields. "Heard Marcus is having some trouble," my boss mentioned one afternoon. "Bank's been asking questions about his payments." I nodded sympathetically while my heart raced. This was what I'd been waiting for. The perfect storm of bad weather, poor planning, and overextension. That evening, I drove past the farm. Marcus was standing in the middle of his withered cornfield, hands on his hips, staring at the brown stalks like he could will them back to life. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered all the times he'd dismissed my ideas, all the years he'd treated me like the family failure. I remembered how he'd laughed when the lawyer read Grandpa's will. I pulled over and walked out to where he stood. "Tough year," I said, keeping my voice neutral. He didn't look at me. "Yeah, real tough. You know, if you ever need help." I let the offer hang in the air. Marcus finally turned to face me, his eyes red with exhaustion and stress. "Help? What could you possibly do to help? You work at a feed store, Danny." I shrugged, just saying, "Family's family." He laughed bitterly. "Right. Family." He walked away without another word. Soon, I thought, very soon. The call came on a Tuesday morning in September. Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. "Danny, I need to talk to you." I found him sitting on Grandpa's old porch, holding a stack of papers. His hands were shaking. The golden boy who'd inherited everything looked like he'd aged 10 years in 6 months. "I'm going to lose it," he said without preamble. "The farm, everything, banks calling the loans." I sat down beside him, careful to keep my expression neutral. "What happened?" "Crop insurance won't cover enough. The drought, the equipment payments, the expansion costs." He rubbed his face with both hands. I thought I was being smart, modernizing, making the farm profitable. "Maybe there's something we can work out," I said carefully. Marcus looked at me with desperate eyes. "Like what? You got a spare million lying around?" The irony was so perfect I almost smiled. Instead, I leaned back in the chair where Grandpa used to sit every evening, watching the sunset over his fields. "Actually," I said slowly, "I might be able to help." Marcus stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "What are you talking about?" I stood up and walked to my truck, returning with the tractor manual. Marcus watched in confusion as I opened it and pulled out the bank statements I'd printed months ago. "Grandpa left me more than just a manual," I said, handing him the papers. I watched his face change as he read the numbers. Confusion gave way to shock, then disbelief, then something that looked like rage. $10 million? His voice cracked. "You've had $10 million this whole time?" Grandpa was a smart man, I said, smarter than either of us realized. Marcus stood up so fast his chair fell over backward. The bank statements fluttered in his hands like leaves in a storm. "You knew," he said, his voice rising. "You knew I was struggling, and you just sat there and watched." "I learned," I corrected, "just like you learned to dismiss me as the family failure." His face flushed red. "This is insane. Why would Grandpa give you $10 million and leave me with a farm I can't afford to keep?" I picked up his fallen chair and sat back down. "Read his letter. It's all in there." Marcus fumbled through the manual until he found Grandpa's note. I watched his expression change as he read, seeing the moment when understanding hit him. "He planned this," Marcus whispered. "The whole thing. He knew I'd overextend myself." "He knew you'd see the farm as a business opportunity," I said. "And he knew I'd see it as home." Marcus sank back into his chair, the fight going out of him. "So what now? You buy the farm for pennies on the dollar while I lose everything?" "That's one option," I admitted. "But it's not the only one." He looked up at me, hope flickering in his eyes. "We could be partners," I continued. "I pay off your debts, we restructure the operation, and we run it together, 50-50. Marcus was quiet for a long time, staring out at the fields that had been in our family for 3 generations. "Why would you do that after everything?" "Because Grandpa was right about one thing. Family is family. And because this farm is big enough for both of us if we're smart about it." I extended my hand. "What do you say, brother?" Marcus stared at my outstretched hand for what felt like an eternity. I could see the war playing out in his mind. Pride versus necessity, anger versus gratitude. Finally, he reached out and shook my hand. 50-50? 50-50, I confirmed, but I handle the finances and we make major decisions together. Over the next week, we worked out the details. I transferred enough money to pay off all of Marcus's loans, giving us a clean slate. We restructured the farm as Hayes Brothers Agricultural LLC with both our names on the deed. The transformation in Marcus was remarkable. Without the crushing weight of debt, he became the brother I remembered from childhood. Innovative, hard-working, and surprisingly humble. He'd learned some expensive lessons about overextension and risk management. "I was an idiot," he admitted one evening as we walked through the recovering fields. "I thought bigger was always better." "You weren't an idiot," I said. "You were ambitious. There's a difference." We developed a new plan for the farm, one that balanced growth with sustainability. We kept some of Marcus's improvements, but scaled back the expansion. Instead of trying to triple our yield overnight, we focused on consistent, profitable growth. The best part was watching the land respond to our combined efforts. Marcus had the business acumen and modern knowledge. I had the deep understanding of the soil and seasons that comes from years of working alongside Grandpa. By Christmas, we were showing a profit. Not the massive returns Marcus had dreamed of, but steady, sustainable income that would keep the farm in the family for another generation. "Grandpa would be proud," Marcus said one snowy evening as we sat on the porch, sharing a beer and watching the sunset. "Yeah," I agreed. "I think he would." Audrey, spring brought new revelations about our grandfather's hidden life. While organizing his papers, we found more than just bank statements. There were letters from investment advisors, correspondence with agricultural researchers, and detailed notes about sustainable farming practices. "Look at this," Marcus said, holding up a folder marked Future Plans. Inside were blueprints for wind turbines, solar panel installations, and water conservation systems. He was planning to modernize the farm all along. But the biggest surprise came when we found a safe deposit box key taped inside the manual's back cover. At the bank, we discovered documents that revealed the full scope of Grandpa's vision. He'd been quietly buying up adjacent properties for years, using shell companies to hide his identity. The Hayes farm wasn't just 500 acres. It was nearly 2,000 acres of carefully assembled land, all held in trust for future generations. "He could have lived like a king," I said, reading through the property deeds. "Instead, he kept wearing those same old overalls and driving that rusty pickup." Marcus shook his head in amazement. He was protecting us. From ourselves, from changing too fast, from losing sight of what mattered. We also found letters he'd written but never sent, one to each of us explaining his reasoning. Mine talked about patience and understanding the land. Marcus's focused on the importance of family and sustainable growth. I misjudged him, Marcus admitted. I thought he was just a stubborn old farmer who didn't understand modern business. We both did, I said, but maybe that was the point. Maybe we needed to find our own way first. That evening, we sat on the porch where Grandpa had spent countless hours planning our future. The weight of his legacy felt different now, not like a burden, but like a gift. By our second year as partners, Hayes Brothers Agricultural had become something neither of us could have built alone. We'd implemented Grandpa's conservation plans, installed renewable energy systems, and developed sustainable farming practices that other operations came to study. The financial success was gratifying, but the personal growth was more important. Marcus had learned to think long-term, while I'd gained confidence in making business decisions. We'd found a balance between innovation and tradition that honored both our grandfather's wisdom and our own ambitions. "You know what the best part is," Marcus said one day as we watched a group of agricultural students touring our solar installation. "We're not just farming anymore, we're teaching." He was right. The farm had become a model for sustainable agriculture, hosting workshops and research projects. Universities sent students to study our water conservation methods. Other family farms came to learn about our renewable energy systems, but success brought new challenges. We'd received several offers to sell the operation to large agricultural corporations. The numbers were tempting, enough to set up both our families for life. "What do you think Grandpa would say?" I asked during one particularly heated discussion about a buyout offer. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "He'd probably ask us why we're even considering it." "Because it's a lot of money," I said. "We already have a lot of money," Marcus pointed out. "What we have here is something more valuable, a legacy." He was right, of course. The farm wasn't just about profit anymore. It was about proving that family businesses could compete with corporate agriculture while maintaining their values and connection to the land. We turned down the offer and kept building something better. 5 years after that day in the lawyer's office, I found myself sitting in Grandpa's old chair, watching my nephew, Jake, help Marcus repair a fence. At 16, Jake had the same love for the land that had driven me to spend every summer here as a kid. "Uncle Danny," he called out, "Dad says you might teach me about the investment side of the operation." I smiled, remembering how Marcus used to dismiss my questions about farm finances. "Sure, Jake, but first you need to understand something." I walked over to where they were working and picked up a handful of soil. "This is what it's all about. Not the money, not the equipment, not even the profits. It's about this dirt and what we can make it produce." Jake nodded seriously, the same way I used to when Grandpa shared his wisdom. That evening, Marcus and I sat on the porch, reviewing the year's financial reports. The farm was more profitable than ever, but more importantly, it was sustainable. We'd proven that family operations could thrive in the modern agricultural economy. "I've been thinking," Marcus said, setting down his papers. "Maybe it's time to update Grandpa's manual." "What do you mean?" "Write our own guide. For Jake, for his kids, for whoever comes next. Include the financial stuff, the sustainable practices, the lessons we've learned." It was a good idea. Grandpa's manual had been about more than tractor maintenance. It had been about passing down knowledge and values. Our version could do the same for future generations. "We'll call it the Hayes Brothers Manual," I said. "Everything a family farmer needs to know." Marcus grinned, "including where we hide the really important stuff." Today, as I write this final chapter, the Hayes Brothers Manual sits in the same kitchen drawer where Grandpa kept his tractor guide. It's thicker now, filled with business plans, conservation strategies, and financial wisdom accumulated over 7 years of partnership. But most importantly, it contains the same spirit that guided Grandpa's original manual. The understanding that farming is about more than crops and profits. It's about stewardship, family, and building something that lasts. Jake graduated from agricultural college last month and returned to work the farm full-time. He brings fresh ideas about precision agriculture and sustainable practices, while respecting the foundation Marcus and I built. The cycle continues. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd found that money immediately and confronted Marcus right away. Would we have destroyed our relationship over pride and anger? Would the farm have been sold to the highest bidder? Grandpa's timing was perfect, as always. He knew Marcus needed to fail before he could truly succeed. He knew I needed to prove myself before I could lead. And he knew that both of us needed to learn that family is more valuable than any inheritance. The farm now spans 2,500 acres and employs 12 people. We host educational programs, conduct research partnerships with 3 universities, and serve as a model for sustainable family agriculture. But at its heart, it's still the same place where a stubborn old farmer taught his grandsons about hard work, patience, and the value of the land. The tractor manual that started it all sits on my desk now. Its pages yellow with age, but its wisdom timeless. Sometimes the smallest gifts carry the greatest treasures. Thank you for listening to this story of family, forgiveness, and the hidden treasures that shape our lives. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What part of the world are you listening from? And if you enjoyed this tale, please subscribe to the channel for more stories about the unexpected ways life can surprise us. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't what you expect to receive.